welcome to the Convex Conversation with me, broadcaster Helen Fospero. The first year we entered and won a coveted International Women's Podcast Award, the event was hosted by comedian, actor, author, and many more wonderful things, Samantha Baines. She had the audience in stitches, talking with raw honesty about her own award-winning podcast, The Divorce Social, born out of her split with her husband. Each subsequent year at the awards evening, I watched Samantha hold the audience and give a little bit more of herself in her openness, warmth, and comical take on life. But this year, I was staggered to learn that Sam is deaf. And as well as the many other strings to her bow, she champions the deaf and disabled community. In fact, she's written a bestseller called Living with Hearing Loss and Deafness, as well as 2 children's books. So as I sat at the BBC Radio Theatre watching Sam celebrate the winners, it felt time to invite this wonderful, multi-talented woman onto our podcast. Sam, you were just saying you're having a bit of a low day. Is that a good enough introduction to make you feel good?
Yeah, that makes me feel quite nice, thanks. She sounds all right, didn't she?
Yeah, I think so. It's so nice to have you in the studio and finally actually be able to just sit down and relax and have a chat about your life. And in fact, I asked you when I came on stage, didn't I? Just whispered in your ear, will you do my podcast?
As you walked past to collect some sort of award, wasn't it? You were like, will you do the podcast? I was like, yes, thanks for asking.
I think it was the Role Model Award, wasn't it? We were runner-up in the Role Model this year. I do love those International Women's Podcast Awards. And I just was overcome with, I'm just going to ask her on stage. And here you are.
It's the best place to ask me as well, because you've got an audience full of witnesses. So if I don't reply for whatever reason, normally just because I have ADHD and I get distracted by replying to emails, you have a whole audience to say, no, she said on stage she'd do it.
Well, I did, because when I went down, you said quite excitedly, I've just been invited onto a podcast. So I did have witnesses. You do so many different things in life: acting, speaking, performing, writing. I mean, you've got a classic, well, I suppose the trendy word for it is portfolio career. But give us a flavour, Sam, of how do you see yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think people always want you to do one, because they're not quite sure where they are with you unless they can place you in a job. And people always ask me which my favourite one is. And I have ADHD as well as being deaf, and I get distracted, right? And I'm a creative person. So the fact that I can do different things helps me, because when I get distracted from one thing, maybe I get stuck with writing a book or my latest idea, I can then flip it and go and record a podcast and give my brain a break from the writing side of things. Or I can just move on to a different book, because I always write at least 2 at once.
You write 2 at once?
Yeah. And this is something that I didn't realise was ADHD for a long time, because I'm late diagnosed. So I just thought that's just the way I do it. And it's a bit weird or quirky, as people often call me, but that's just the way it goes. But yeah, it's actually because my brain gets a bit stuck if I do the same thing for too long. And so I swap between them, and it gives me inspiration doing the other thing and helps keep me interested. And I actually don't know how people do just one. I don't think I could manage it.
I do lots of things too, and I think it's because I'm a curious person and I love so many different things in life. I enjoy writing, I enjoy being on the telly or doing voiceovers or doing podcasts. So it's nice to have lots of different interests, I think. How old were you when you realised you had ADHD? Because a lot of people are diagnosed pretty late in life, aren't they?
So I found out this year.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you make a decision to go and get tested? Had there been things going on in life that made you wonder if you were on the spectrum somewhere with something like ADHD?
Yeah, I'd always thought there might be something. It wasn't until I had my daughter, who's 19 months old now, that all of a sudden, all my strategies and ways of doing things that I'd worked on throughout my life that work for me, like swapping between writing a book and recording a podcast, suddenly didn't work very well anymore, because there was a whole new human in the mix. And I also had to look after her, and you can't swap a baby. I don't know if anyone's told you this, if you experienced it, but they don't just stop when you go and record a podcast. So all of a sudden, all my coping strategies went out the window. And that's when I thought, right, I really think there's something going on here. And I'd like to find out if it is ADHD, because then there's lots of literature and research on that. And people can advise me on strategies that I can use that might then work for me. So for me, it was less about medicating it and things like that. I just wanted the confirmation. And I was on the NHS waiting list for at least 2 years. And then I went private to get the diagnosis.
That's interesting, because Rory Bremner, who's been a friend of mine for 25 years and has also been on the podcast with many different guises and voices, he has ADHD.
I was going to say he must, surely, because he plays so many different people.
Well, he calls it a blessing and a curse because he's a very clever man and his mind moves very quickly. And I think he thinks that's the genius of the ADHD. But he came and spoke to Convex, who the podcast was originally commissioned by. And he said, if there's anybody in the audience who's waited 2 or 3 years on the NHS, try, if you can, book one private appointment, and then you can get whatever treatment you need on the NHS. And it's awful to think that there are people on those long, long lists waiting. But that was his advice too.
Yeah, I think it's very expensive to get diagnosed, and it's very complicated. And if you do then want to go onto medication, you have to do the medication privately until it sits well with you. And then you can do a joint care agreement with your GP. I've looked into the medication and it would take about 3 months and you'd be paying about $1,000.
It's a lot of money.
Before you can then go back to the NHS. And that's after you've already paid for the diagnosis as well. So it shouldn't be a privilege to know that you have ADHD or something about you. And so I do a lot of activism around disability and deafness. And there's just so much that needs to be more accessible.
There is. We will go into some of that later on. But did it help you realise that you couldn't swap your child for a dog? You know what I mean? Your strategies work better with your young baby once you actually knew.
I think it's still a work in progress.
That's motherhood.
Yeah. But I would say that definitely knowing was the weight off straight away, because it explains so many things. I've always been late for everything. I've always been late for my friends, and quite often just felt like a really bad friend. And also, being an actress, people think that you're very self-centered as standard because you're an actress. But when you have ADHD, the way you relate in conversations is by telling a story about yourself. So if you started talking about loving your dog, as a way of relating to your story, I would tell you a story about loving my dog, rather than maybe non-neurodiverse people would say, oh, that's so lovely, tell me more about your dog. So historically, I haven't been amazing at asking questions, despite hosting a podcast. I do ask questions on that. And I've never been told I talk too much about myself, but I always worry that I talk too much about myself. So just learning all these things about ADHD, and that's actually me trying to build a rapport, is tell you things about myself. Just, I don't know, help me feel like less of a bad person, I guess, less of a bad friend. So that's nice, but I'm definitely still working on the to-do lists and all of those things.
You made me laugh on stage when you talk about oversharing. I think you talked about the big pants you'd got on in the BBC Radio
Chub rub
Theatre.
shorts.
I've never tried those.
Oh,
Are they
they're
good?
so good.
Zoe Ball talks a lot about those.
I saw recently she did.
Yes.
I was like, I was trying to get sponsored by Chub Rub shorts. They're great. Basically, I'm curvy. I hate that, but I am. And so I have large, luscious thighs. And when I'm wearing a skirt and no shorts, the thighs rub together and it's uncomfortable. And if you wear little shorts underneath, they don't rub and create sore skin. And also you feel like you can lunge about the place and you'll only flash your shorts, not your pants, which is slightly more acceptable. So I actually just flashed my shorts, didn't I, on the stage?
You did.
And they're like nude coloured, but you can get some very exciting, colourful ones. So I have like some turquoise ones for a bit of spice.
I think
underneath.
you need to wear those at the next awards,
Yeah.
the turquoise ones. I was in the days of Spanx.
Yeah.
And I remember I just had my first baby and I was back on the television and I was trying to wear something that would hold everything in and together. And I remember being absolutely relieved that the day I wasn't wearing them was the day that one of the Strictly Come dancers came in. I was hosting the Lorraine show and his theatre tour was called Let's Do It. So I said, let's do it. It was Anton Dubek. So I said to Anton Dubek, let's do it. And I was about to say, tell me about the theatre tour. And he went, oh, let's do it. And he swept me up in his arms and, well, I went as stiff as a board. I looked like one of those mannequins that you see in a department store window. And my dress went flying up at the back on live television. And all I thought afterwards was, thank goodness that was not a Spanx day.
What were you wearing? Pants?
Actually,
A thong?
yeah, well, not a thong. No, the days of the thong have long gone. But probably some
But
large,
that would be
large
shocking
pants
on live
Yes,
TV.
it would.
Thank God you were wearing large pants.
It was all quite traumatic. I've only really just recovered, and I think it was 10 years ago. So
Funny things happen.
lots of funny things happened to me. How did you become, let's start with comedy. How did you become a comedian?
Oh my
Or why
goodness.
did you become a comedian?
Why?
Have you always been funny, Sam, as a child?
Well, I've definitely always entertained. My mum said that my sister and I, well, my sister's younger than me, so I just dragged her along in anything I was doing. But I used to do a show when my mum and dad were having a dinner party and they had all their friends round. I'd put on the entertainment. So I used to do a show called The Bendy Sisters, which I made my sister do with me because I'm hypermobile. But I couldn't do anything like the splits or a cartwheel. So I'd just stretch. So that was the entertainment, was just me stretching for them. So I think they found that amusing. Maybe I started doing comedy before I knew it was comedy. And I still sometimes stretch on stage with lunging. And it's something that I don't even always realise I'm doing. But sometimes I lunge into a joke.
I've seen you lunge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen you lunge.
It's like a physical reaction
You had
to
a
my comedy.
floaty, multicoloured, beautiful
Yes.
dress on.
Kitty
and it allowed
Joseph
you
dress.
to lunge. I don't even know whether you knew you were doing it, actually, but you did lunge
Yeah,
a number
I lunge
of times.
a lot. I don't know what but maybe it's back to the Bendy Sisters for me. I've
So it
always
started
been a
with
Bendy,
the Bendy
Sisters.
sisters.
Yeah.
But how did it then progress?
Sorry, how did it become professional?
More than your mum and dad's dinner parties.
Yeah. So I always wanted to be an actor. I liked expressing myself. So my mum sent me to like drama classes, basically to just get the emotion out of me, I think. And then I did drama at school, I was in school plays. And then I went to Exeter to do drama, Exeter University, because I think I was too scared to apply for drama school straight away. And everyone said you needed a degree to get a proper job. And also my mum and dad, they were a bit worried about me wanting to be an actress because they were like, it's really hard and it's
Get a
probably not
proper
going to
job.
happen. And yeah, you need to be financially stable. My mum was an accountant and my dad worked for the council. So they were like, what are you doing? But then out of Exeter, I still really wanted to go to drama school. So then I applied to Central School of Speech and Drama and I went there and I did acting for screen, which I loved. And I came out of drama school thinking I was going to be discovered. I remember you have a showcase at the end of drama school. So because I was doing acting for screen, we had a film showcase. So we were in all these short films. There was a screening. All these agents came and all these casting directors. And I remember there was this really big time agent and we all knew who he was and we were all looking at him. And he came with his assistant and his assistant picked up my CV because by the door there was all of our headshots and on the back was all of our CVs. So his assistant picked up my headshot and CV and I saw it really clearly. I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a big moment. And he showed it to the big shot agent and the big shot agent shook his head and the assistant put it back down. And that was the harsh reality as to what the industry is like. So then the acting jobs were slow. And I auditioned actually to be part of a sketch group called Vinegar Knickers.
There's a real knicker theme going on in this chat.
Oh, yeah. There's knickers in my children's books as well. And so we did a couple of Edinburgh Fringes. I remember I was flyering on the Royal Mile for our show, and I handed a lady the flyer that said Vinegar Knickers, and she went, "Oh, no," and handed it back to me. So that was an experience. And then there was 3 of us, and it was quite difficult to organise schedules for 3 busy women. So I thought, oh, maybe stand-up will be easier because I only have to organise myself and it's still being funny. And so then I started doing that. And I did that for 7 years. I don't officially do stand-up anymore, but I am loath to let go of the comedy world forever.
Don't let go of it. You're too good at that. But is it terrifying when you go up on stage and do a one-woman comedy show, or did you absolutely thrive in it? Because obviously you'd had a lot of experience from the Bendy Girls onwards, really. Seeing you perform now, I can't imagine there being any terror to it. I know you've done a lot now and you do it so easily, but in those early days, were you dreading no one laughing, or did it always work out quite well?
Yeah, you always dread that no one will laugh. But when you start out, you're so excited by the adrenaline of it all. And as long as they laugh once in your set, you're like, yay, I'm amazing. I remember my first gig, I was like, oh my God, I'm a natural. I was born to do this. I'm hilarious. And of course you feel like that because it's like all your family and friends have come. And then you start doing proper gigs and you're like, oh, okay, this is slightly harder than I thought. And then you do the same material in what you think is the same delivery to 2 different audiences on 2 different nights and get completely different reactions. But then you work on your material and then on the whole, you know it's going to get a laugh. I've had terrible gigs. I was doing the Edinburgh Fringe for my first hour solo show, and I was doing it at the Pleasance Courtyard, which at the time, trying to get a spot there was like the holy grail of locations for your Edinburgh comedy debut. And the show was going really well. I'd sold out every day, all the tickets for the entire run. And I was flabbergasted that happened and still am. And then I went to do this gig. And obviously in the Edinburgh world, everyone was like, wow, you're doing so well because you've sold out and I've got 2 people in my show. So I think I was feeling quite pleased with myself. And I went and did this mixed bill with other comedians and I just completely died, it's what it's called. There was almost no laughter. The audience were just staring at me. And it's so embarrassing because it's in front of the other comedians.
Oh, no.
And you've only got 10 minutes and it's meant to be a sales technique for your show. Obviously, I didn't need that because it sold out already. But I feel like the other comedians are like, wow, how has she sold out the run? But also, we know that people have a bad gig. I've had some terrible ones. I did one in a pub once and no one made a noise, not even a laugh or like a groan. Nothing. And I left and I cried all the way home on the train. So yeah, there have been some terrible gigs. And part of that is why I've stopped doing stand-up comedy. But also being deaf, it's quite a stressful environment because it's very noisy with the audience all coming in. There's normally a bar where people are getting drinks. There's a green room for the comedians, but it's normally a curtain separates you and the audience. So there's a lot going on and then comedians are talking to you. The person who runs the gig's talking to you. And when you're on stage, it's fine because there's a microphone and everyone's being quiet. But it's all the before and after and the travelling. So it meant that it's called concentration fatigue, something deaf people get. And when you lip read, which I do and things like that, because you're trying to hear basically all the time. So every time someone's talking to you, you're trying to understand, hear what they're saying. So I used to be so exhausted the day after gigs, and you're meant to be able to work a full-time job and gig every evening, apparently.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Can I ask you about your deafness? Because I've seen you perform a number of times, and until this particular awards show, when you had some capgens on stage and you talked a little bit about it. But how deaf are you? And I don't know whether that's the right thing to ask, Sam, because we've been chatting away today. I know some of the time you're lip reading, but will you tell us about your journey with that and when you were diagnosed and how you cope with it and how you live with it?
It's interesting because I went to the preview of a documentary about a deaf person and there were lots of deaf people there. So we were all signing afterwards. And I'm learning BSL. So I've done my level 1 and passed. So I can do light conversational BSL. So a lot of fluent BSL users or people who use British Sign Language as their first language are very gracious with me and let me spell things out to them because I don't know the sign. But I was at an event and I said to someone who, like me, has hearing aids and is learning BSL, that people often ask me, how deaf are you? And I almost don't like to answer that question because I think for hearing people, you know, like the careers thing. So you want to know if I'm an actress because then you understand that. So you want to know how much I can hear because then you understand that. But when you're deaf, it's not as simple as that because I can still hear some things. I have loss more in the higher frequencies. So particularly annoyingly, men tend to have lower voices. So I tend to be able to hear them better, which is not always necessarily what I'd like. And if a woman has a higher pitched voice or anyone has a higher pitched voice, I sometimes can't hear it very well. Also, if there's background noise, I really struggle. I won't be able to distinguish words at all if I wasn't lip reading. So I do still have some hearing, but also the majority of deaf people, even people who are profoundly deaf, as we call it, still have some hearing. There's very few people that hear absolute silence. So they'll still hear muffled noises or some version of sound that might just not sound sharp. So I think when hearing people ask me, how deaf are you? It's for them to try and understand, but they still won't understand because no matter your level of deafness, you still don't have the accessibility that someone with full hearing has in normal life. And so the way I explain that is my journey home. So if I was paying for a train ticket on the train machine ticket thing and my card was declined, hopefully it won't be, the machine beeps and I can't hear that beep without my hearing aids. So unless I read the thing saying card declined, I wouldn't know. The doors beep when they're closing on the train. I've been trapped in many a door. The announcements on the train, even with my hearing aids, I still can't understand every word. And it's the same with lip reading. It's all about context and some letters sound the same. So a P and a B sounds the same. So if you were to say pack on your lips, it could look like the word back, which starts with a B. So then I have to think about the context of the sentence and whether you're more likely to be saying the word back with a B or the word pack with a P. So it's like a guessing game constantly, all day, every sentence. And also people turn their backs. So you can't lip read. People put their hands in front of their mouth. If there's low lighting, it's more difficult to lip read. So not only is there the actual lip reading, there's all the things that come in the way of the lip reading, plus not being able to hear some things. And lots of people think hearing aids cure your hearing so that as long as you get hearing aids, I'll have the same level of hearing as a person with full hearing. And that's not true. So hearing aids just slightly improve what you've got, as in they can make the sounds a bit sharper. But I will never have the same level of hearing as a person with full hearing has.
Am I right in thinking that you were only diagnosed at 29?
Yeah.
So up until 29 years old, were you aware that your hearing might not be as sharp as perhaps friends' hearing?
No.
No.
So I was born just before the newborn hearing test. So the newborn hearing test means that any baby born now has a hearing test within the first few weeks of their lives to check. I didn't have that. So I didn't have a hearing test until I was 29.
So what did you think was going on?
I didn't think anything. I just thought that's the way everyone heard, because you don't know any different really until I had 2 types of tinnitus and I went to the GP with my tinnitus and then she sent me for the hearing test. And at the time, I used to say this in my stand-up, I thought that she'd get a bonus for sending me for a hearing test. And so I went and I was like, all right, fine, I'll get you a bonus. I know it's difficult being a GP. And it sounds like a joke, but I really thought it's some initiative. They've all been told, I'll just send people for hearing tests because we're not doing enough of that. So I genuinely went along like this is just a tick box scenario to make sure I've had it. And I also say to people, in a hearing test, you can't hear what you can't hear. And that sounds straightforward, but in an eye test, you can see that you can't see. So I genuinely thought I'd aced my hearing test and that I was going to walk out and they'd be like, you got 20/20 hearing, it's not a thing, and engrave my name on some sort of board for Superman levels of hearing. So when I came out and they were like, yeah, you've got hearing loss in both ears and it's bad enough on one side that we think you need a hearing aid. And this is with the NHS, so they don't give you a hearing aid if it's super mild. It was proper jaw on the floor. It was proper jaw on the floor. And I ended up crying in a bike shed in Westfield Shopping Centre. But anyway, I go into that all in the book.
Tell me a bit about the book, because it's all about coping with hearing loss and deafness, which affects many more people than perhaps we realise.
Yeah, so 18 million people in the UK have some form of hearing loss or deafness. That's 1 in 3. It's just gone, it used to be 1 in 5. So when I first brought out the book, it was 1 in 5. And then the new paperback version, it's got the 1 in 3. So it's a huge amount of people. And a lot of us don't get our hearing checked. So many people might not know. Many people might know but choose not to wear hearing aids. And that's fine if you're choosing it. A lot of deaf people that I know choose not to wear hearing aids because they're part of their deaf culture and they want to use British Sign Language and they want to go voice off, we call it, where you don't speak and you sign. But there's another group of people that aren't using hearing aids because they just don't want people to see them or they don't want to feel old before their time. And that is what I felt at 29. And so when I was told I needed a hearing aid, I have 2 now, it was a complete shock and a complete new world to me. And I thought, I'm not even 30. What's going on? I'm not going to be able to do my job. I was doing period dramas at the time, like The Crown and Call the Midwife. I thought, I can't wear a hearing aid in those. I was presenting on the radio and I was like, well, you can't be a deaf radio presenter. So I thought everything was going to change from this new diagnosis, in inverted commas. There's nothing wrong with us. We're not broken. We're just different, right? So I looked for books and literature, and that's when I got in touch with the RNID, which is the Royal National Institute for Deaf People, and I've been their ambassador
Which you're
now.
an ambassador.
Yeah, for 5 years. But I had to find out all this stuff myself and reach out to people and do the research. And I wanted to put all of that together in a book so other people didn't have to, and write about my experience, but also interview other people about their experiences. People who were born deaf, who grew up in deaf families, who discovered they were deaf later in life in their 60s, 70s, how they feel about that, and as well as organisations and charities. So that is what Living with Hearing Loss and Deafness is. And it's called Living with Hearing Loss and Deafness, a guide to loving it and owning it, which I think is the really important part of it, because a lot of people hear about deafness and they think, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. What a terrible thing. And actually, it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I love being deaf.
Tell us why, Sam.
Yeah, so tinnitus, no.
Well,
I would definitely give my tinnitus away, but I wouldn't give my deafness away. I love it because the deaf community is incredible, and the people I've met and the experiences I've had. And I never would have written a book, let alone 3, if I hadn't become deaf. And the reason I wrote my children's books is because I was working with the RNID. I was talking to parents of deaf children, and they were saying, is there anything you can recommend, like a TV show or a book for kids with a deaf main character? And there are many more now. But at the time, I couldn't think of one. So I was like, oh gosh, well, I'm going to have to write one then. And so rather than believing that I could write a book, which I'm not sure I had the confidence in before, I was like, well, I have to write one because there has to be one with a deaf main character. So I just had to do it. And it actually drove me to do it. And now I absolutely love it. And I've written 3 and I've just written another children's book. So the things that it's driven me to do and the strength that it's made me realise I have, and also, yeah, the community and the incredible people, it's been great.
It sounds like it's a book that actually we should all read, because I've worked with a lot of blind people and visually impaired people, and you can kind of understand maybe the visual loss more easily. And you talked about trains. When you get on trains, there's things in Braille now, and there seems to be a lot more out there to help the blind community. And I think the deaf, we don't really see it. And it's not really there. If somebody's blind, they might have a white stick, they might have a guide dog. So it sounds like something that we would all learn from, especially given that 1 in 3 people suffer with hearing loss or deafness. And also, as well as championing the deaf community, you've also done a lot of stuff and do an awful lot of stuff with the disabled community too, don't you?
Yeah, so a lot of deaf people don't like to, well, they like to be called deaf, but we join together with the disabled community because we're all disabled by society.
It's a nice way of saying it, actually, and sorry to interrupt you there. Quite a poignant thing to say, disabled by society,
But it's so true as well.
Because that is true.
And a lot of people are really scared of the word disabled. And I was to begin with. I was like, oh my gosh, am I disabled now? What does that mean? And actually, it's a very joyous word. And the disabled community is wonderful and supportive and varied and creative and brilliant, as is the deaf community. And so I'm very proud to be part of the disabled community as someone with ADHD and who is deaf. But I think people are scared of the word disabled because they think, oh, you're disabled, as in there's something wrong with you. But no, we're disabled by society. Yes, some disabilities aren't great all the time. If it comes with pain, chronic illness and things like that. But that doesn't mean that person can't still have pride in being disabled. And if society were more accessible, many of us wouldn't feel disabled in everyday life. If the train announcements were captioned, I wouldn't feel disabled by not being able to understand what platform my train's going to come on and where it's going. And I think hearing people who've read my book are quite astonished by how much of your life being deaf affects, because you don't see it. And quite often people meet me and I don't have a deaf accent, as we call it. So outwardly, people might be surprised that I'm deaf. But it's never something I'm trying to hide. I wear hearing aid jewellery and I work with a company to design a range of hearing aid jewellery, Deaf Metal, and they do loads of brilliant hearing aid jewellery. And I used to have a pink hearing aid. My new hearing aids don't come in pink. People have glittery ear molds and stuff and are proud to show things off. And there's glittery walking canes that you can get and bright colours. And I think people think it's something to be ashamed of, but it's not. And when it's a hidden disability, we have a privilege because we can pass, in inverted commas, as non-disabled. But also we have to explain constantly. And I've been told I'm not disabled. I wanted to enter a writing competition with a large channel, let's say, for scripts by disabled people. And I wanted to write a script about being deaf, but there were other disabled characters in it with different disabilities. But I was told verbally, I was told this by one of the producers of the scheme, that I'm not really disabled though. And I was like, well, I'm deaf. And she was like, yeah, it's not really a disability. I was like, it is legally a disability, yeah. In the law, under the Equality Act, it's listed as a disability. And people just don't believe it or understand it, or understand how much more money it costs to be disabled and how much more effort everything takes. Because when I'm on the train, I need to be on my phone the whole time checking everything because I might not hear if there's a change or a delay. So it would be difficult for me to just read a book on the train.
My blind friend, my lovely blind friend, Amma Latif, was making some television for a company I won't name on a podcast, but he is incredible. And they finished the filming and they were very happy with it. But they said at the end, he didn't look blind. And I think you've been told before, if I've got my research right, that you don't sound deaf.
I've been told I don't look deaf.
What does deaf look like? Exactly.
And I always say, is it because I'm not attractive enough? Because there are some very attractive deaf people like Rose Ayling-Ellis, Niall DeMarco in the US, Marley Matlin. Deaf people are hot and incredibly funny as well. So I'm sort of like, oh no, I don't look cool enough to be deaf.
You're cool enough also to be in some of my favourite shows. Tell us a bit about The Crown, which I was slightly obsessed with. Who did you play in The Crown and what was that like? Have you got any anecdotes from set?
Yeah, so I was in series 1.
That was my favourite. That was Claire Foy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Matt Smith.
So it was series 1. I was in an episode about the smog in London. And I was best friends with Churchill's secretary, who's a blonde girl called Venetia, played by the brilliant Kate Phillips. And we lived together and I got really ill in the smog. And I was Cockney, she's a bit posh. And so she had to take me to hospital. And at the same time, Churchill was trying to work out what to do about this smog. Venetia made him come into hospital to see what it was like. Jonathan Lithgow was playing Churchill. And I didn't have any scenes with him, annoyingly, because I only had scenes pretending to have sex and with Venetia and then being half awake in hospital, rasping for breath. So none with Churchill. But we got to do rehearsals with Jonathan Lithgow and he said to me, "You're very funny," because some of the lines were funny at this point and also we were just chit-chatting in between. And I was so starstruck because he had been in so many brilliant comedies that I watched growing up. I was like, oh my God, can I use that on my stand-up comedy poster? And he was like, ha ha ha. I was like, no, actually though, can I actually use that on my poster? And he was like, ha 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 ha. So
did you?
I think that meant no, no. But no, he was a lot of fun. And because he was playing Churchill and Churchill used to paint the actual Churchill, Jonathan Lithgow got into drawing whilst he was playing Churchill. And so he drew this sketch of Churchill that he added some colour to. And he sent us all a copy of it at the end of filming. So I have a little signed copy of a sketch of Churchill in my house from Jonathan Lithgow.
That's so nice. Maybe you could put that on your poster instead of his quote. And you were in Call the Midwife, which is another series that I absolutely loved. I would imagine being on set for Call the Midwife was quite fun too, was it?
Yes, although when I was on set of Call the Midwife, through no fault of the Call the Midwife people, I hadn't, due to an email mix-up, seen the actual script. So I'd learnt a slightly different script. And then it was every actor's nightmare where you turn up on the day and the script is slightly different. And because it's only slightly different, like they've changed words that sort of mean the same thing, it's even harder to remember the new script. So I was just panicking for like a lot of it. But I had a fake baby bump and this is before I'd been pregnant or anything. So it's my first experience and it was a lot of fun. It was made of foam. So it's a lot lighter than an actual baby bump. And you have to put it on like a Borat swimming costume. So it has straps. So it goes on like the bottom of a swimming costume. And then the foam belly is like in the pants bit. And then it has straps that go over your shoulders.
Like braces.
Yeah. And then you put that over your... So I took so many photos of me just in my underwear, this baby bump in my trailer.
But back to pants again, aren't we?
Yeah, always.
What we haven't talked about is your award-winning podcast, The Divorce Social. Tell us a bit about that for those who haven't listened to it. And that was born out of your real life experience, wasn't it?
Yeah. So as you've probably garnered by now, strange and interesting things happen in my life. And one of those things was that my dad died on my hen do before I got married. He wasn't with us on the hen do, but the butler in the buff had just left and we got a call saying your dad's died. So it wasn't a great start. So then he wasn't there for the big wedding that we'd planned. So I put on my wedding dress in the morning and cried. Again, not a great start. Anyway, we were married for 1.5 years and then we decided it wasn't good. We both weren't very happy. It was a mutual thing that we should break up. So I cried for a week and my sister came over and she was like, you must shower because you smell, which is something that only a sister can say whilst also being there for you.
Was that fair comment at the time?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was filthy. Covered in my own tears and sweat and all sorts. I don't know why emotion makes you sweat. All the liquid just comes out of your body. Why? So that happened. But I'd recently, just before that, been offered a new job. So I cried for a week and then I flew to LA to work with Channing Tatum on Magic Mike Live. And then I hosted it in the West End for 18 months, directed by Channing Tatum, whilst getting divorced and writing my first children's book. And I'm bisexual, so I had a relationship with a woman for the whole thing, even though it was all about sexy men. So it was a strange time in my life. And that's when I decided that I should do a podcast about divorce. So I finished Magic Mike and started the podcast, The Divorce Social. And a lot of it was me having had this whirlwind divorce time, which sounds very snazzy, but there was a lot of crying and grief in that. And like, what am I doing with my life? And I just wanted to talk to other people about their experience and see if they felt the same and if they had similar experiences. And it's quite a selfish thing, really. I just wanted to connect with some other divorced people. And a podcast is quite a good excuse because people come and sit with you then and you can record it. And people said to me, no one's going to listen to a podcast about divorce. And then they have. And we've had 500,000 listens.
500,000 listens. And you get some fantastic guests. I think one of my favourites probably, because I also love her as a comedian, is Sarah Millican.
Yeah. She was the first one. I feel like we peaked too soon.
I didn't realise she was the first. Is she a friend of yours?
Well, I know her from comedy. And she was divorced. And a lot of other divorced female comedians are always like, Sarah Millican really helped me when I got divorced. So when I was doing the podcast, she was the first person I thought of. And I know her a little bit, so I could be like, hello, please, can you come on? And that was really lovely of her. Obviously, this brand new podcast. And she was like, okay, I'll talk about my divorce. But divorce is the reason she started doing stand-up.
Is it? I didn't realise that.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Do you think, in a way, when you're from a comedy background, that humour is a coping mechanism? Because when I have moments when I try and be funny, sometimes it's born out of perhaps something tragic or not very funny, and I probably say something inappropriate at that time. But is looking at life through a bit more of a comedy lens, does it help when you've had times when you're crying on your bathroom floor, but trying to find some lightness at a dark time? Do you find that helps you?
Yeah, absolutely. And also I think it's a way for me to process things. When you're getting divorced, you want to talk about it. You're allowed that one dump with each friend where you go for it. But then everyone doesn't want to hear about it all the time. And you can get a bit boring with people because you're processing this really big thing, whether it's divorce or like when my dad died or even discovering I was deaf. It's these big life events and you want to be able to talk it out or journal it out or whatever your way is to experience it. And I realised that maybe my friends were getting bored of me, but audiences might not. So it worked that way. Also, I always say, if you're laughing, you're not crying. And sometimes you just need a break from the crying.
You also worked with somebody else who I absolutely adore, who seems to have absolutely zero filter, and that's Miriam Margolyes. Have I pronounced that right? Margolyes.
Yeah, I say Margolyes, but I don't know.
I think it is Margolyes.
You might be saying it right.
I've never met her. I've always wanted to meet her. If you're listening, Miriam, please come and do the podcast. But what's she like?
She's just wild and hilarious. And yeah, no filter. So I did a show with her called Bucket and it was a comedy. And she took me under her wing a little bit because it was about her and it was written by Frogstone, who played her daughter. And they went on this road trip and one of the places they came was where I worked. And we rehearsed the scene that we were doing together and she decided that I was funny and she told me that. And obviously I was thrilled. And again, like, and I put it on the poster, but people keep laughing. And I'm like, no, I need press quotes. This is why I don't do stand-up anymore because people would never agree to these quotes. But yeah, so she decided I was funny, which was obviously thrilling for me. And then she said that I should come and have lunch with her, which was just in the canteen where everyone was having lunch, but I could sit next to her. So I was like, okay. And then she just told me loads of stories and started doing all these voices. And I didn't realise that she was the caramel bunny and all these different things.
Oh, I didn't know she was the caramel bunny.
I think she was, unless she was doing an impression of the caramel, but I think she was. Anyway, so she was doing all these voices and telling me all these anecdotes and it was just the most entertaining. I don't think I ate anything. But then we were doing the scene, and obviously she'd been very lovely to me before, but we were doing a wide shot, which is when they filmed the two of you doing the scene. And then we went in for close-ups. So we did the wide and then we came in for my close-up. And during the filming of my close-up, she fell asleep. So she was sitting in the chair opposite me. So I had an eye line, but she went to sleep. Fair play, she was doing 12-hour days and she was, I think, in her 70s at the time. So she went to sleep. And I didn't take it too seriously because she told me I was funny already. And then we turned round to do her close-up. And someone said, can we wake Miriam up, please? And so some poor runner had to go up and gently shake her awake, like, Miriam, Miriam. She woke up, inhaled this big, and then she was ready to go. And I couldn't believe, if I'd had a nap, even a tiny power nap, I'd need a coffee. I'd be like, sorry, can I just have a moment to recalibrate my thoughts? She just inhaled and just went for a take and just was ready to go. And I was like, I'm so impressed by whatever just happened here. It's something I've never experienced before on set. But yeah, she was hilarious.
She's a legend. And we talked about lots of different things, Sam, but what's next? What's on the horizon for you?
I've just done an acting job in a BBC period drama. I have done another period drama. I did Changing Ends with Alan Carr, which was set in the 80s. But this is back to the 1950s. So it's nice to do it again now with a hearing aid and wear it and be open about it. And they just styled my hair and everyone knew I was deaf and I had a lip speaker on set. So that was a really nice, not full circle because I'm still going, but one of them moment. And then, yeah, I've just written a new children's book. So hopefully, fingers crossed, someone agrees to publish that. Still doing some work around disability benefits because there's been the cuts and there's been a law passed and we still don't know exactly what's going on with that. So still doing a lot of campaigning around that. And I'm also part of a working group to change the law around pets in divorce because pets are currently treated as chattel.
What's chattel?
So like the fridge or the cutlery or a chair. So it's like you have the fridge and I'll have the dog. So we want to change the law to treat them more as beings that have needs, not to the extent of custody agreement with kids, but just to acknowledge that one scenario might be better for the welfare of the dog rather than just who wants it.
And how did that come about? Have you experienced that with a pet? Or did you just hear about it and think something needed to be done?
I had a lawyer on my podcast, a divorce lawyer who'd also been divorced and had written children's books. And they got in touch saying that there was this law and they were trying to change things. And did I want to be involved as a celebrity ambassador? And I was like, well, yes, but not that. I want to be in the working group. So I want to go to the meetings and actually find out what's going on and go to the House of Lords and talk to these people. And so she said yes, and that's what we've done.
I'm going to end this podcast by thanking you, obviously, because that would be the polite thing to do. But by saying, Sam, that I'm even more in awe of you than I have been. I think you do extraordinary things and you're not afraid to just get out there and make changes and make differences. And I think the disabled community, the deaf community, Pride, people are very lucky to have you championing all this. You've got a great platform. You do it with such aplomb and humour. And I just think you're ace. And I've never ended a podcast telling anybody they're ace, but I feel that's what I should say. You're a fantastic woman and keep on doing all of this stuff. It's really, really important.
Thank you.
You've been listening to comedian, actor, writer, and many more things. Have I missed anything out?
Broadcaster, I normally say.
Let's add broadcaster in there. An advocate for those with hearing loss and disability. You've been listening to Samantha Baines. Download and subscribe to our series at convex.podbean.com or search The Convex Conversation on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to yours. And a follow on Spotify and Apple would be much appreciated. I'll be back next week with another great guest. Join me then.